Now I am going to consider a very famous and popular PP effect in the games industry, namely the bloom effect. If I select the main camera here and I move up to the component menu and I choose image effects and bloom here, it also in brackets it has written HDR and lens flares. I'm going to select the bloom effect, and in the object inspector you can see we have a bloom effect component. And in the viewport, you may already have seen the effects of this bloom. If I enable and disable the component and you take a look in the game view here, you will see the kind of effect that it is having. In short, the bloom effect intensifies the highlights in the scene and applies a Gaussian blur to those highlights in order to begin to bleed out the highlights. And things appear to take on a kind of strange glow, which gives the scene a dreamy and whimsical feel. It is often used in fantasy role-playing games to give a strange, dreamy effect to the environment. Now, we have a whole range of properties here to adjust for the effect. We have this intensity value here, and as I drag and increase this intensity, you will see in the viewport that the effect is growing stronger and stronger and stronger, and the highlights are just bleeding out to a far greater extent here, and we're producing some very strange appearance here. So I'm going to reset that back to a value of 1 here. Actually, I might increase it just a little, just so we can see the effects and change of our changes more prominently. So we have here this bloom effect that's being applied. We have this threshold value, and what this effectively does is it sets a particular luminance level, and any values above, any values in this image, any pixels that are greater than this luminance threshold will be classified by the bloom effect as a highlight and will be intensified and blurred. This means that as I lower the threshold, more and more pixels in this image will become classified as a highlight, and the effect will intensify. As you can see now, I'm reducing this effect, and more pixels are coming into that threshold here. As I increase the threshold, again raising the luminance values, fewer and fewer pixels are being affected by the bloom until we get to some very high threshold when there is almost no change at all. And if I enable and disable this effect, you notice almost no difference in the before and the after. I'm going to set the threshold back to 0.5. We also have the blur iterations and the blur spread. The blur iterations here, this again applies and intensifies the highlight. It increases the number of times that Gaussian blur is applied to the highlights. So the greater the value, the more intense the effect becomes. I'm just going to leave this at a value of 1 here. We also have the blur spread, which increases the range of the effect. So there are the basic values that apply to bloom. Bloom can be a very interesting effect, although it is important not to overdo that effect. Next up, I'm going to consider chromatic aberration.